All right, back to the Keystone Agricultural Producers Agriculture Roundtable now. The way it's going to work for the question part here, each candidate will get about 2 minutes to answer each question. Then we'll follow up with 2 minutes of discussion where candidates can respond to other candidates' answers. So here we go. Our first question, again, questions coming from CAP. Our first question has to do with water management. It was more apparent than ever this year with all the flooding that took place in the spring, then dryness in many areas later in the year, that Manitoba needs a water management strategy, some plan that involves all stakeholders, and this will take a tremendous amount of planning, research, and commitment by government, industry, and the general public. So the question, what is your party's plan to deal with the water management issues in this province? And we'll start with our PC representative, Cliff Graydon.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. There's no question that the effects of flooding have been devastating, and until you've been flooded, you really don't know the extent of that devastation. We'd certainly like to thank everyone who has helped during this flood, whether that was supplying a pasture, whether that was helping with sandbagging, whether that was giving people places to move to when they were flooded out. Flooding and excess moisture conditions take a very heavy toll on agricultural producers, not only economically but mentally and physically. We have seen the stress level go very, very high. We have repeatedly called on the NDP to address the situation of the flooding, and with very little results, I might add. Between 2000 and 2010, we saw 158.25 million in excess moisture claims, and we don't know how high the losses will be this year, but we do know that they will be very high. Any loss of potential food production is a negative for the province. We know that. It hurts producers and Manitoba's bottom lines. Manitobans, many of the small communities depend on agriculture. That's the general store in the community. That's your short line businesses. Could be the veterinarian. These all suffer from any of these floods that we've had, and the mismanagement of the water that has taken place under the 12 years of the NDP regime. We had thousands of unceded acres this year. Thousands of head of livestock had to be relocated, and it's uncertain when conditions will return to normal for these ranchers. Manitoba Progressive Conservatives favor a comprehensive water management strategy that will tackle a broad spectrum of issues, from flooding to drainage to the need to store water in the event of a future drought. Investment in water-related infrastructures are crucial to the health of agriculture sector, local governments, and the rural economy. In the days ahead, we will be talking more about our water management strategies. We support the use of an ecological goods and service programming, as well as to help address both water quality and water quality issues. We will be releasing more details of our ecological goods and service strategies soon.
All right, thank you, Cliff. With that, we'll shift to Kate Storey on behalf of the Green Party.
Flooding seems to be the new normal in Manitoba. We've seen the 100-year flood, the 300-year flood, and now the 700-year flood. Our lakes receive all the runoff from the entire Western Canadian prairies and a good part of northern U.S. We have to prepare ways to hold that water back and slow the flow. We have to start working with other provinces and the U.S. so that they can do their part. And here in Manitoba, paying our own farmers keeps on being talked about. EG&S, Environmental Goods and Services. Pay the farmer to rebuild those wetlands and those riparian zones. Make sure the trees are there to slow the water, keep the melt in the spring spread out. And when we go to drain our fields, we all want to drain the sloughs. We are using bigger and bigger machinery, but those drainage projects should be required to store the water somewhere on site. So it's fine to make your fields work better for you, but we have to hold that water, maybe in a big slough somewhere, to protect your neighbor downstream. And that gives a double benefit, because if drought happens, you're protecting your own water table. There's all kinds of good ideas out there. We just need the incentive, and I think that this flood this spring is the incentive we need to go with EG&S.
All right. We'll have, hopefully, if we have time, we'll talk a bit more about EG&S and alternative land use services later. Thank you for your response there, Kate. We'll go to Monica now. What would the Liberal Party, Manitoba Liberal Party, do in terms of water management issues?
Well, the Manitoba Liberal Party believes that water storage is as important as drainage. We also believe that it is the farmer's right to be able to drain their cropland so they can get back into business. It is important to protect the cropland, the farmland that we have right now. So water storage is as important as drainage. There is an example at the Deerwood project on the South Tobacco Creek down in Miami. Small dams have made a huge difference in terms of water storage and slowing down drainage. This project is a model for what can be done elsewhere throughout Manitoba. We need to couple water storage and improved drainage. We will expand the provincial efforts to improve water management with the understanding that improved water management can have major impact in decreasing the risk to farmers from periods of excessive wet or dry weather. Just 4 years ago down in Altona, we were in a desperate drought situation. People were worried where they're going to get their drinking water as well, so clean drinking water. So we also have to look at where can we store water in Manitoba and how do we drain that. And this is also like a trading between municipalities, who's draining, who's storing, and how we farmers for the storage facilities that they're going to provide to us. So this is an important part of developing Manitoba and protecting our 10% of all Canadian farmland in Manitoba.
Thank you, Monica. Stan, you have a response to this question as well?
Sure, Kelvin. Yeah, I think Monica just made a couple of very good points in terms of coordination and bringing people together. There's no doubt that this past year and the year before have been very stressful in farm country when it comes to the amount of water that we've received. But I think what we do have to remember that there are wet years and there are dry years, and we have to be in a position to plan for each, and we have to be investing in infrastructure for each, and that's what we have been doing, and that's what we intend to continue to do as an NDP government. I want to suggest that. A couple of really basic things to begin with. I mean, we need to build on successes, and one of the very successful groups out there have been our conservation districts. That's a very good model to look at watersheds and to include all of the stakeholders in the area. I know down in the country there around Altona, up here in the Dauphin area, we've got some very good examples of farmers and others coming together at the CD table and planning and putting a little money on the table and partnering with a provincial government and looking for other sources of funding to both drain and retain water on the basis of a watershed. The other thing I think we really have to remember is that this isn't something new to farmers. Farmers for years have been making good decisions. Sometimes those decisions are questionable, but for the most part, farmers have made good decisions in terms of usage of water. Farmers depend on water. Farmers grow things. Farmers need to have a steady supply of water and a good management system for the water that they need. My great-grandparents came up here into the Parkland area way back in the 1890s. They made good water management and good environmental decisions back then, and that kind of a tradition continues. So I don't want people to just kind of dump the problem on the farmer's lap and leave the farmer to try to struggle along. Our government's position is to work with the farmer and
That's
with
2
groups
minutes there, Stan,
to make sure that gets done.
All right, thank you, Stan. In terms of responses here, anybody have a response? Maybe for inside the studio here, if you could raise your hand to let me know if you have a response. And on the phone, Stan, you may just have to cut in. Kate, what do you have to say in terms of responding to what some of the other candidates have said?
Okay, we all seem to agree that wetlands have to be rebuilt to hold the water back. That needs to be paid for. A per acre payment has to equal land rent. And so where do you get the money? Of course, the United States is also facing this problem. They're starting to develop a carbon system so outside businesses can pay their farmers who are going to do the work on the land. I think we really have to put some effort into this carbon payments.
All right. Cliff.
Yes, thank you. You're absolutely right. Monica has mentioned that we need to have all the stakeholders at the table. Stan, you mentioned that as well. You brought up a good point about the CDs, Stan. The CDs have done some excellent work. And I guess I wonder why the NDP have cut the funding for the last few years to the CDs. And you've done that on a regular basis. When we talk about the project in Tobacco Creek, that's a great project. and it's federally funded. So I'm just wondering, when you say the CDs are a tool to do this, are you prepared to add more funding to them?
Well, Cliff, first of all, I think you better check your facts. When we look at the number of projects out there and the amount of money that our provincial government has put into them, I think you'll see that we've vastly increased that since your Conservatives had their chance to do it back in the 90s. We continue to make those investments. We continue to work with conservation districts. It's not the kind of thing that I think we should be fighting over. I think it's the kind of thing we should all be sitting down on the basis of watersheds and working together on projects, whether it be Tobacco Creek or Edwards Creek up here, and continue to work to make good decisions in terms of water management.
Monica, do you have a quick comment?
Yes, I do. I actually take, the NDP and the Conservative have not looked after our infrastructure in rural Manitoba at all. And the Manitoba Liberal Party is the only one saying that we need to ensure that municipalities have long-term funding and it's stable funding, and the water management, drainage, and retention is part of that long-term funding. We have to sit down between us municipalities and farmers and taxpayers. What are we going to do with this water? Where are we going to slow down the water? Where are we going to dam the water? How are we going to slow down the water going into Lake Winnipeg or Lake Manitoba? And who are we flooding downstream? Because we have to protect farmland in this province. This is where we differ. We are going to focus on rural Manitoba infrastructure as well as education, as well as healthcare. We absolutely believe that we have to focus on these things in Manitoba to get it done right, to go so we can move forward in the future. Everybody else is just talking and not really planning
let's
ahead.
Wrap it up here, Monica.
Sorry. All right.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to our next question. We'll have more discussion about water issues coming up.